Raise your hand if you have ever witnessed a discussion about research and evidence-based practices get really heated. My name is Dudek-Brannan, and I help pediatric therapists be better leaders so that they can make a bigger impact with their services. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about evidence-based practices and research and some of the issues that I see coming up in some of the professional discussion groups. So if you are a pediatric clinician of any sort, you've probably noticed that in some of the discussion groups, there's a lot of talk about what is effective when it comes to using research to inform our practices for our clients. Obviously, that's going to be super important so that we can be ethical and effective at the same time. But when we're discussing these things with other professionals, which is a great thing to do in order to build our knowledge, a lot of times, especially when you're online, there can be some difficulty communication with communicating. And one of the reasons that often happens is because people go into groups often asking for research to support what they're doing in therapy or to get ideas about what they should do in therapy. And a lot of times people will ask a question and they'll say, I'm looking into this topic or this technique. Is there any research to support this? And they'll want to get some information about it. And a lot of times what people will do, which is common practice, is that they'll start sharing article links. And in a lot of the groups that I am in, it's common practice. And even some of the group admins require that if you say, oh, research supports, whatever the technique is, a lot of times they even require that you share an actual article link to back up what you're saying, which I totally agree with. I think that's what we should be doing. And what a lot of people will do is that when they're making recommendations and saying, there's research to back up whatever it is, a lot of times people will post a theoretical article instead of an empirical article. And they're actually different. And a lot of times debates start to happen when people start to say, yes, there's the science supports this, and they're just talking all about theory and not actual empirical evidence. So the difference when you're actually looking at a journal article, if an article is theoretical, it's something that doesn't necessarily have a specific study that was done. It's just talking about a broad theory or a topic. A lot of times there might be some literature cited within the actual article itself, but it's more theoretical. There's not an actual instruction or experimental design that happened that they're talking about in that article, whereas an empirical article is an actual study where there's a specific methodology for collecting data. And usually if there is an experimental design, then in those cases there's specific independent variables and dependent variables that they're looking at. So with that, when we're saying studies and science back this up, it's a lot stronger when we're talking about what the science supports. Now, that being said, theoretical articles are still very valuable, but they're not the same. And so many times when people want information about research, they're really asking for an empirical article. And then when people come in and start talking about theory, then that's when some of these discussions get very heated. Now, of course, if you've been in any of the professional groups, there are many other reasons why discussions get a little spicy. This is just one of them. So when you are evaluating research as a clinician and when you're looking at peer-reviewed journals, this is just something to be aware of. Just know that they're different. And know that when you're thinking about how to inform your practices, you do want to look for those empirical articles in order to support what you're doing. That's not to say that the theoretical articles don't also give you information that you can use to inform your practice, but you do want to make sure that a lot of the techniques that you're doing are supported by empirical evidence. I know that when I am making decisions about what I would recommend in therapy, usually where I start would be the techniques that are supported by empirical evidence. And then I would only go to the theoretical side to explain concepts a little bit further, or if there's something where we're not quite sure how to address it yet, and there's really not a lot of empirical evidence available. But I would usually start with the empirical evidence and then build from there. So if you found this useful, definitely follow my page for more information like it.